Good evening!
My name is John Hub and I talk about video games on the internet. If this is somehow the first video of mine you're seeing, I've challenged myself to 100% all of these games in the Yakuza franchise, all in under a year. It also means if you haven't seen the other 9 videos I've made, you have to watch them all in chronological order first. Sorry, I don't make the rules. Today we'll be doing a true 100% run of Lost Judgment, in-game completion list, all achievements, the whole darn thing only on this YouTube channel. I'm the only one that's done it. Will the sequel to Judgment be harder to complete than the original? How did the Judgment get lost in the first place? And if the Judgment is lost in this one, can it be found? Well, you can find all of that out and more in another electrifying installment of Year of Like a Dragon. Bzzz. Lost Judgment is the second game in a fantastic duology of games. But word on the street is, we could make it a trilogy of Judgment games, but only if we get hashtag Trudgement trending. Oh, won't you please get hashtag Trudgement trending, everyone, please? And just like any good sequel should, Lost Judgment improves on just about everything. Yagami now has 4 fighting styles with the addition of Snake and Boxer on top of his Crane and Tiger styles from the first game. The gameplay feels a lot smoother in general, the game looks beautiful, and the story is okay. Lost Judgment's story isn't exactly my favorite, but it's okay. The first Judgment revolves around this huge main case that's thrilling from beginning to end, and Lost Judgment is, it's there too. I won't spoil too much, but let's just say that Lost Judgment gets a little lost in the sauce from trying to juggle too many moving parts at once. But let's get into how my story run went. I played on easy difficulty, so difficult combat sections were few and far between. I had a bit of trouble on some sections in the later game, such as this one in the finale where you have to fight like 100 enemies, or this one part where you fight in this outside motel area place. The real difficult sections were these dumb stealth ones. Yagami has been seen taking down hundreds of people, yet he can't choke out a dude without throwing a coin on the floor. Kinda silly, man. I've criticized the first Judgment game for having a bit too much non-combat, non-interesting detective work like tailing missions, chases that last too long and you just have like an auto runner until you catch the guy, or scouting outside a building with your drone. But Lost Judgment really doesn't have much of that. There's an annoying section or two where you have to take a photo at just the right moment, investigate things by rapidly swinging your camera around until the A button prompt appears, or be Assassin's Creed in an alleyway. But those sections don't show up much, and when they do, they're really not that bad. Combine all of that with the fact that Lost Judgment's story is only a couple hours long if you skip cutscenes, which I do, and this ended up being one of the easiest stories in one of these games to date. I don't know if there's a good way to describe side cases in Lost Judgment. I guess I say that they're cases that you can do on the side. I mentioned that there's a ton of detective type activities to do in this game, and the side cases are where you'll find most of the game's chases, tailing missions, and where you sniff out clues with a heckin' cute pupper. Aw, I just want to boot this doggo's little snoot. Yeah, you can unsubscribe now, I'm sorry. One thought I've always had is that Yagami solving side cases makes a lot more sense than Kiryu just helping random strangers on the street. Except in this game, a lot of the side cases are just to introduce a new minigame or collectible to find. There's one where you help investigate something with a game developer, and he drags you into this VR Mario Party game. Then there's another one where there's another game dev, and it's more gaming. I hate video games. Some standout side cases though include this one where you have to chase down a living body model in the high school. There's this 10 case long storyline that ends with a pretty easy and boring fight. This one's just a standout because it did not need to be 10 cases long in my opinion. And there's this one that introduces this squirrel graffiti around town that leads you to getting very good in-game rewards. More on that later. I don't necessarily think that this game's side cases are a winning lineup, but the combat and detective stuff alone is fun enough that I don't really mind. The final side case has you fighting Amon, who's a staple of the entire franchise. This time around though, he's pretty damn tough. Using repeat special moves do way less damage, he can heal if you give him any breathing room at all, and he's got a move to hit you at really any distance. I was on the easiest difficulty, and I almost lost a couple times. With that though, I finished all the side cases in maybe a couple of hours, and all things considered, it was a mostly painless endeavor. Every game in the Yakuza franchise has a main story, a side story, and a main side story. Lost Judgment's main side story comes in the form of high school clubs that Yagami helps out at. There are 10 of these clubs, each with their own storylines, And then there's a club that serves as an overarching storyline to connect the storyline of every other club to each other. It's a bit confusing. All you gotta know is that most of these clubs have a minigame associated with them, and they range from fun but brief to miserable and grindy. I feel like whenever there's a group of things, my instinct is always to rank them, so I'm gonna go against that instinct and just talk about the clubs in no particular order, and give them a rating. So here's me talking about the clubs. Dance Club is one of the first clubs you're introduced to in the storyline, and it has a great minigame to go with it. I think it's based on Friday Night Funkin' or something. Yagami has no business doing flips and shit during a high school dance practice, but hey, if it works, it works. 8 out of 10. Boxing is probably my favorite club out of the bunch, because it's got hardly any story and a ton of fighting. You climb the ranks and beat the snot out of high schoolers. What's not to love? 10 out of 10. Skateboarding Club should be my favorite because of my love for Tony Hawk and skate, but it's a bit too simple. This one consists of collecting coins and skating in front of ramps to do a QuickTime event in one of a few bland skate parks. There's also skate races, which are pretty fun. 6 out of 10. I forget if this one is called Motorcycle or Biker Club. You ride bikes in this one. You ram into opponents until there's one person left, and then it becomes a race. This whole minigame has a weird scripted feel, like the other racers just rubber band to you. Feels a bit weird, but it's still fun. 5 out of 10. Esports Club has you meeting with a group of students and playing one of the hottest fighting games around, Virtua Fighter 5 for the PlayStation 3. I can confidently say that no esports clubs have ever pulled this game out at a meeting. 3 out of 10. Photography Club is a good concept, bogged down by too much setup and not enough photography. You need to shoot the best pictures possible for a couple of scenes, but a lot of them have this weird quirk where the best moment to take the photo comes and goes before you even know what's going on. This one kinda sucks. 2 out of 10. I'm torn when it comes to the Robotics Club. It's easily the most in-depth school club minigame of them all. It's pretty fun, but the completion metrics associated with this one are so miserable that it sours the entire experience for me. You have a team of 3 robots, one of which you control, and fight another team of 3 to place Tetris pieces down on a board. Pieces you pick up can only be placed on the ends of other pieces, and if you can connect your team's starting point to the enemies, you instantly win. This one starts off so easy that you don't need to buy a single upgrade, then the CPU goes insane out of nowhere and you need to farm materials for entirely too long. Completing this one requires you to craft every single robot part from a laundry list of materials that are either expensive or rare to come by, as well as win every main and side mission in this mode, of which there's many. Also, you need to play a ton of extra missions because the funds for crafting parts can't come from Yagami's own wallet, but rather from school funds gained from every 3 mission wins. I found Robotics Club to be one of the most fun minigames of the bunch, but completing it is very cringe. 6 out of 10. This high school has students that go to casinos apparently. This one literally just has Yagami playing a couple of hands of poker and that's about it. 5 out of 10. If the Children Gambling Club wasn't weird enough, part of completing the school clubs had Yagami visiting a bar that a couple students went to. Here, you need to befriend all of the hostesses by having conversations and playing a ton of darts with them. The most annoying part of this one is every time you make a little bit of progress, you have to leave and come back to advance the story, or you just need to leave to get sober before you can continue. It's painless, and it's boring and long, and you already know I skipped the cutscenes whenever I could. I'm feeling a strong 4 out of 10 on this one. So all the clubs in the game are connected to a big case, and the Mystery Research Club is a club devoted to putting the pieces of that case together. It's something of a hub club, which is also what I call my most dedicated fans. I won't sugarcoat it, everyone. I skipped the cutscenes, you already know I did. There's a cool fight you do at the end of this one that gets you a ton of SP and a useful item for the squirrel graffiti mechanic I mentioned earlier. This one gets 2 thumbs up out of 10. Beating the story gives you access to the Gauntlet. This is a series of tough combat encounters and a couple of miscellaneous things like getting through the parkour sections from the story in a specific amount of time. These challenges are honestly pretty tough, probably tougher than anything in the story or in the side activities in Lost Judgment. I did these right after beating the story, but I'd highly recommend you play some of the side stuff just to get used to the combat. There's a lot of upgrades I was unable to get from the SP that the story gives you alone, and a lot of the challenges rely on knowing Yagami's styles inside and out. In any case, I've compiled my top 5 toughest The Gauntlet challenges. EX Boost is a temporary power-up that gives Yagami an enhanced moveset, among other things. The challenge of this one is that you need to defeat every enemy without dropping out of this boost. I gave it a couple tries and was confused as to how to beat this one, but then I realized I had an item that fully restores the meter in my inventory. Oopsie daisy. In the number 4 spot is this one where you need to defeat every enemy by making them surrender. The added challenge comes in when you notice you have almost no HP and enemies are not nice enough to let you grab them without their friends giving you a little smack on the head. I got through this one after a couple of tries. This long stealth section is pretty bad, not only because it's a harder version of a section that shows up in the story, but because there's multiple times where you think you're going the right way, and then you actually have to go through a hard to see narrow path a couple of times. I hate when the only way you can beat something is through trial and error, and this was definitely an example of that. The number 2 challenge has Yagami going through this long section from the finale in not nearly enough time. This one has multiple fights where it's pretty easy to lose, as well as lengthy parkour sections where one blunder means the end of your attempt. I got through it on my 3rd or 4th try, but always after exhausting most of the time I was given first. Kinda frustrating. Super Amon is the last gauntlet challenge listed, and it's flat out unfair in my opinion. You do a one-on-one fight with Amon just like in the side case, but this time he's way faster and way stronger. I don't even have advice on how to approach this one, I kinda just got lucky. This took more tries than I care to mention, and I tackled these challenges before knowing the intricacies of Yagami's fighting styles. Not sure how much that would have even helped though when I'm getting spammed by a barrage of blasts, fire, and remote bombs. But hey, I got through it somehow, eventually. That was hell, but let's do something fun now. You know 'em and you love 'em. They're minigames. It's safe to assume that with one of these games, there'll be an abundance of minigames to play and complete. The completion metrics for these are all pretty reasonable, and usually consist of getting a high score or beating the different stages of the game. Once again, I'll be listing these, this time in no particular order. Hey, with all these lists, might as well call this game a list judgment, am I right? There are 4 Super Retro Sega arcade games present: Fantasy Zone, Outrun, Space Harrier, and Super Hang-On. The only metrics for these are you have to get easy to reach high scores. One thing of note though is that for some reason, when you're on the easiest difficulty, you have unlimited lives in Fantasy Zone, making it impossible to complete without changing the difficulty beforehand. This specific quirk, to my knowledge, does not exist in any other games in the series. You can find a racing game in the arcade called Motor Raid. Completing this one requires you to complete a Grand Prix, I call them Grand Prix, and beating every stage on time trial mode. You don't need to get first place, which is a good lesson to take home. In life, we're always striving to be the best at something, but I think it's important sometimes to... Shut up! I hope you didn't get too used to winning though. The arcade also offers a few different fighting games, with Fighting Vipers being the hardest one by far. You need to beat the first 7 stages, but the CPU cheats by secretly reading my mind, knowing every move I'm gonna make. I'm a masher when it comes to anything that isn't Tekken or Soul Calibur, and although mashing got me far enough to complete this one, I don't think I'll be winning any tournaments. The next fighter is Virtua Fighter 5. Unfortunately, the esports club from before doesn't count for any of the completion metrics here. You need to beat every stage, including the bonus stage that you only get one attempt at, and if you lose you have to do it all over again. You also just have to win a match as every character, and win 30 matches. You wouldn't know this if you're a first time viewer, but I've done these exact completion metrics like 4 times at this point, and spamming Brad's R1 combo has worked for me like a damn charm every time. This last fighter is brand new to the Yakuza series, and it's Sonic? Like Ben Schwartz? You need to beat every playable character in a fight, and grabbing goes a pretty long way in this one. Hama of the Dead is probably the coolest arcade game in Lost Judgment, and maybe the coolest minigame. It's an on-rails arcade shooter where you shoot zombies, and it's a blast from beginning to end. To complete it, you have to beat every stage, defeat 500 zombies, get 777 headshots exactly, and pick up 50 health or grenade pickups. Each stage has like 2 or 3 of these pickups, so I ran through the same chapter 20-ish times and that was that. And just when I thought I was out of the arcade woods, the UFO catcher snaps me right back to reality. This is a claw game where the claw doesn't really agree with you ever. Thankfully, in some games in the series, you have to obtain every possible prize in the machines, and in others you only need 15 of any prize, and Lost Judgment is the latter. I'm now realizing that there are a lot of arcade or arcade-like minigames in this one, because there's still 2 more that I have to talk about. The first one is Arcelios, which is a 2-stick shooter with an overhead perspective. You shoot at these little pieces of shit on the screen and get big points. Get your points big enough, you might just fuck around and complete the damn thing. The other minigame in question is Dyson Cube. This is the Yakuza series' answer to Mario Party, and it's just okay. You face off in a one-on-one race to the finish against an opponent, racking up rewards while simultaneously preventing them from reaching the end before you. There's a lot to complete with this one. Firstly, if you're going to complete Dice and Cube, you need to get the free pass that allows you to play this one infinitely without needing to buy expensive passes every time. Finding the free pass is also a completion metric, so you actually have to do this. You need to beat every course, of which there are a few, use skills 100 times, activate this bonus mode 10 times, and there's a side case that has you fighting against multiple hard opponents. Losing to one of these at the last second because they decided to roll only 6s the entire game is pretty tilting. One type of space that you can land on in this minigame is a battle space, where a random enemy encounter will spawn, and if you win you get a reward. I could not for the life of me find a tiger in one of these spaces, and no one online seemed to have a consistent way to find them. It had me steamed, I'll tell you that much. Alright, that's enough video games. Let's play a real game within a video game. The batting center is where you can hit balls with a bat. Completing this one is pretty straightforward, just complete every course. Continuing the trend of hardcore sports, golf. The golf center has a closest to the pin challenge, where you need to aim the ball between obstacles, as well as a bingo challenge, where you need to hit specific bingo squares until the entire board is filled out. My nearly 2-decade-long career of Mario Golf Toadstool Tour for the GameCube made me way too prepared for this one.
Damn it!
Is darts a sport? I think so, it's in the Olympics or something. In addition to playing with each of the hostesses a few times, you need to play every rule set of darts, and get a low ton, a high ton, a hat trick, 3 in the bed, a ton 80, and a white horse, which is actually my favorite Katy Perry song. Alright, enough of this jock shit, we're nerds again. Shogi is the toughest minigame in theory, but we have technology to do all the work for us now. There are 10 shogi puzzles that I was actually able to do on my own, and then you need to win a couple of full matches as well. This is where technology comes in, because you can just install a shogi app on your phone and play the opponent's moves as your own to know what to do. Drone racing returns from the first Judgment game. You construct a drone from parts that you get from winning races and Grand Prixes, and try to become the drone racing champion. The toughest bits of this one are finishing in first place in every race in the Champion League, which has you racing against very hard CPUs on every single course. The other tough part is just constructing every drone part. Getting the money required for this is easy enough, but knowing where to find the materials for these parts, as well as how many of those you'll need, is a bit of a nightmare. Last but not least, there are 4 gambling games that can be played at casinos or gambling halls. These are Blackjack, Poker, Koi Koi, and Oichokabu. Blackjack is the single best way to make money in the game, as you can get access to a bunch of cheat items and exchange chips for yen.
Blackjack.
All of these gambling games are pretty easy to complete, because since you already have so much yen from Blackjack, completing the others is as simple as playing until you win enough hands to reach the completion requirements. And with that, that's every minigame I care to talk about. But there is one minigame I don't care to talk about. Now you may think my only goal is to 100% the Yakuza series, but a new goal has emerged, and that's to play Mahjong as little as humanly possible. I'm not one of those Yakuza fans who dislikes the game. I can't really explain it, it just kinda stresses me out. A major part of completing Lost Judgment that I haven't talked about yet is getting every upgrade for Yagami. This is done by obtaining SP, which is gained by doing just about anything, mostly through combat encounters or completing missions though. My advice for new players of Lost Judgment is to get the upgrades that increase your SP gain immediately, then the ones that increase your attack damage, but I digress. Another function of SP aside from upgrades is there's a shop that lets you buy items for SP. There's a bit of gear, some drone parts, but what we're looking for is Mahjong cheat items that let us instantly win hands. In order to complete Mahjong, you need to win 30 hands and win at 10 different tables between 3 Mahjong parlors in the game. In order to buy 30 cheat items, you actually need 900,000 SP. For reference, every upgrade in the game costs about 2.2 million SP. And that's not including the SP that you have to spend on Blackjack cheat items, which is the best way to farm yen in the game. So I'd say the real amount of SP I needed was somewhere around 4 million. Now there are 3 viable methods of farming SP that I can think of. The first is doing the story and as many side missions as possible. This did not yield as much SP as I needed, and there's a finite amount. Method 2, there are these energy drinks called Hug Bomb that are in convenience store. The first Judgment game had a similar SP farming strategy, but it got heavily nerfed in Lost Judgment. So this method would consist of buying 3 energy drinks, drinking them, wash, rinse, and repeat for hours, of which I did a little bit of my grinding this way. The third, and in my opinion most viable method for farming SP is simply to fight enemies on the street. There's this long street that has enemies spawning all over, and I ended up alternating between fighting them and doing the energy drink thing. After more hours than I can count of doing this, I finally had enough SP for everything. You'd think that mindless grinding to circumvent what might have been less total time just playing Mahjong would be a hollow victory, But no, it felt pretty damn good. Get fucked, Mahjong. Just an editor's note here, Mahjong's actually a really fun minigame. There's just a lot of RNG since it's technically a gambling game, and that combined with me running out of time for this challenge makes it all the more stressful. Sorry, Mahjong. Mwah. At its core, and this may be surprising to hear, Lost Judgment is actually a pretty short game. It's got one of the shortest stories in the series, side activities with a few exceptions take a reasonable amount of time to complete, and side cases aren't too abundant and take no time to beat at all. All of these factors uniquely puts Lost Judgment in the position of being the sheep in wolf's clothing of the franchise. That's to say, it looks tough, but it's actually harmless on the surface. The only real thing that tacks on major completion time is all the busy work required to 100% this one. So with how slow the game can be, it's actually more like a sloth in sheep's clothing with wolf's clothing under that. What the fuck is he talking about? Some of the busiest work there is has to do with just walking around. You need to travel a total of 100 kilometers. This one's pretty easy due to being able to ride the skateboard, and since I was completing the game, I was traveling a ton anyway. But there are a lot of similar completion metrics that I had to go out of my way for. In addition to 100 kilometers, you also have to walk 10 kilometers with a dog. I literally ran up and down the highway for like an hour or so. Speaking of doing fuck all for an hour, you have to fly the drone for a total of an hour. Now this was one of the last things I did in my whole run of the game, and at the time I was starting this, I had flown the drone a total of 3 minutes. A straight up annoying completion metric is you have to pick up 500 materials on the street. You pretty much can't go more than a couple feet without seeing materials on the ground, but this did require me to skate around for well over the required 100 kilometers just to pick up the shit off the ground, and pretty much all of it was useless. There are 4 girlfriends that you have to meet, go on dates with, and be in a relationship with simultaneously. Kinda messed up. This takes a couple of hours and probably a guide since you have to change the time of day constantly for some reason. A staple of this series is having to go to every restaurant and order everything on the menu. This game has a system where restaurants will give you a boost of some sort, with the most useful one being a temporary increase in SP earned. I just went to every restaurant one after another until I was done though. You have to play with cats 100 times in this game. There's a side case that requires you to befriend a few cats, which consists of going up to a group of cats, hoping the one you need to befriend walks up to you, and feeding it its favorite food until a meter fills. When I was done befriending all the cats, I had played with them about 30 times, so yeah, I had to go do that 70 more times, no big deal. You need every drone part for the drone racing minigame, and every robotics part for the robotics minigame. There's a little bit of crossover between the parts for these two, and you need a ton of yen for this. You also need every piece of equipable gear and every skateboard. You have to go to essentially every store in the game to get all this stuff, and once again, it is not cheap. You have to take 100 photos with your phone. There's this weird delay between every photo you take that was not there in the past games, but this one was no biggie. You need to defeat 500 enemies each with the tiger, crane, and snake styles. If I had my way, I'd avoid crane like the plague, but I had to farm a bunch of battles anyway, so I got through this while doing that. Lastly, there's the side case that introduces squirrel graffiti. You find a squirrel, pull out a detective tool, and it leads to either an item or another squirrel-based clue where you need to use another detective tool. There's 50 something of these squirrels in the game, and honestly if they weren't in the game, you'd almost never need to use Yagami's detective tools. The final part of my completion runs is always beating the game on Legend difficulty. Some have said that this is the ultimate form of busy work, playing the game again. You're able to do this on New Game Plus, and Yagami is so strong with full upgrades that, spoiler alert, this was an absolute breeze. Yeah, that's the game, you guys. I guess my last moments with this game were just really dull and repetitive and not really that memorable.
Yo, get the fuck out of my way.
Certified Lover Boy? Certified Kaito Files. The Kaito Files is a DLC expansion that serves as a standalone story for fan favorite character Kaito. For the first time we get to play as Kaito, and if you've ever played any other Yakuza games, his 2 fighting styles are eerily similar to Kiryu's Beast and Brawler styles. I like those styles though, so I don't mind. There's 4 chapters to this one, but what took more time than anything was finding the assortment of collectibles around town. Yagami has a collection of detective tools that let him find things, but Kaito just tracks things using his superhuman hearing and sense of smell. There's nowhere that says you have to find every collectible to complete the Kaito Files, and it makes more sense to not because yen is pretty much useless and a large chunk of the collectibles are just yen. All in all, this DLC is kinda just a mini Judgment game within Lost Judgment. The only actual completion metrics for this one are achievements for beating every chapter of the story, and one for defeating a super secret and kind of easy boss that requires you to obtain every upgrade. From the metrics alone, you might think this Kaido character is straightforward and all business, but he's actually a silly fucking goose. And, oh, the video's over. I think the video's over. I did that? You did do that, John Hub, didn't you? Yeah, I just said that. 56 achievements. Entire in-game completion log complete. Kaido files complete. I'll let you take a guess as to what took longer to 100%, this game or the original Judgment. Believe it or not, it's actually the original Judgment. Judgment took 61.7 hours to complete, whereas Lost Judgment only took 57.8 hours. Does this mean that Lost Judgment is easier than Judgment? Not really. Lost Judgment is densely packed with activities to do at every corner. There's definitely more completion metrics in Lost Judgment, and whether it's because there are some completion metrics that are the same as Judgment, so I was used to them, or just because they took less time, I was able to squeak this 100% out just a bit faster. Now for the $1 million question. Would I recommend that you, the viewer, 100% Lost Judgment? Can I be honest? No. Thank you all for watching. We're getting down to the wire and I'm kinda scared. Do you think I can 100% Like a Dragon Gaiden and an Infinite Wealth before the end of the year? I don't know. You'll have to watch and find out. Thank you to the Patreon and YouTube members whose names you're seeing on the screen right now. Your support has kept me talking about video games on the internet with a nice chunk of change in my pocket. Thanks. As always, feel free to drop a like and a subscribe if you feel so inclined. I'll see you next time, where I'll be erasing my name. My name is gone. I don't know who I am anymore. Help!